I will be extremely surprised if Texas is as inefficient offensively with this second look at Georgia as they were in the first matchup against Austin. Does that sound right? How much, excuse me, let me not bully you into, how much from the first matchup can we take and apply to this?
A lot.
I think so too.
Because I feel like I could counter that by saying Texas's offense hasn't really looked great against any defense this good all year. I don't think Texas's offense looked great last week against Texas A&M. Outside of that Florida game in which they were playing a team with its third string QB, they haven't looked very good on the offensive side of the ball in a while. So I don't know if we're going to see as overwhelming of a performance as we saw in that first one, but it's important to point out Calvin Banks right now, we don't know his situation for certain. He only played 7 snaps against A&M, had the ankle injury, did not come back. Gooseby, I think, is the kid who's replaced him name. Let's see here. Yeah, Trevor Gooseby.
Trevor.
He played well in his place, but I don't know if that's who I want going out there against this Georgia defensive front. But, like, you look at that game, the one thing I think could be different is what happened in that night is Georgia completely took away Texas's run game. Didn't do they 27 carries, 28 yards, right? 1.1 yards per carry. But Quintrevion Wisner did have 52 yards on 15 carries in that game, which isn't great, but he wasn't really their feature back yet. That kind of started his ascension to that role because since then he has become more of a workhorse and he has been far more effective. So maybe having him in that role solidified helps them do better on the ground. So that could look to maybe change things up. I could also mention the fact that we saw Arch Manning used in certain packages last week. Maybe that could help with their run game because you throw Arch out there a little bit. Now you've got to account for him. And if nothing else, it could at least help in the red zone because last year we talked about Texas being terrible in the red zone because they were. They've improved this year, but they're still not very good. They rank 51st nationally in points per red zone possession at 4.55. So they're just slightly above average in that department. And when you look at the team with all the talent that it has, you would expect them to be a lot better than that. So how will they do? Will they be able to finish drives against Georgia in this? And will they be able to stay on schedule? Because the funniest thing from that first game, like obviously Texas lost, so they've caught the brunt of it. But let's see. Texas's offense had a 44% negative play rate in that game. So nearly half their plays went for negative or no yardage. Wow, that's terrible. But guess what? Georgia's offense was at 45% in that game too. So like both of these offenses kind of sucked pretty hard in the first game. There were obviously the Carson Beck turnovers that really, had impacted it, but Texas didn't do anything with them. So I think we could also argue, can Georgia's offense hold up better against this Texas defense than it did in the first meeting? And I think they can. Because I do think that since Tate Ratledge has returned, and we touched on this yesterday, and we touched on it Saturday night, Georgia's offense has been much better. Carson Beck has not been nearly as much pressure as he has been since Ratledge returned. They've been functioning better. I think he's only been sacked once in the last 3 games, and he's only been pressured 3 or 4 times total. So that is going to be huge to me. If Georgia's offensive line can hold up better, and I think they have a better chance of doing so than Texas is at this point because we saw Georgia completely overwhelm that unit when it was fully healthy. And I don't know if it's fully healthy right now.
I had written down on my notes pretty much the same things you had. I had more Arch Manning, question mark, because they did sprinkle him in, and we already saw him play against this team, but maybe they're realizing, hey, Quinn Ewers, whether it's health-related, whether it's, the ankle, whether it's oblique, they just don't want him to be a sitting duck back there. And he can scramble, but he doesn't have the legs that Arch does. So you show them that for a reason. I think he showcased that in that game for this game to at least let Georgia know they have to prep for it. I'll be curious if they have some passing options for Arch Manning because I don't think they're going to put him in there just to run. That might be the next wrinkle that you see. And then I had the Quintrevion Wisner, like you got to get more of him. And I think he'll be more committed to him. What's kind of been crazy is you mentioned Texas offense, and we've mentioned this a couple times on here about Quinn Ewers' average depth of target, how he's been such a check down player. I mean, when you look at this offense and you look at the receivers, it's kind of like Penn State. Like their leading receiver is Gunnar Helm. He's their tight end. Like their receivers, which we thought were going to be better, have not been the productive receivers that you're typically used to seeing for a Steve Sarkisian-led offense. So that's been a surprise. And then on the other side of the ball, the thing that I don't think you get a repeat of the last game is Carson Beck has been I don't know if he's fixed, but I don't think he plays as bad as he did last time. That was on the road. This is kind of going to be a home game for Georgia. Like, it's just the reality of playing in Atlanta. I think Texas will travel, but there are going to be crowd issues. Like, I think Carson Beck will play better. So I'm actually surprised a little bit that Texas is the favorite in this game.
Texas held Georgia to just 283 yards of total offense in that first game at 3.99 yards per play. The Texas defensive players in the locker room after the game were telling reporters, we are disappointed with the result, but we think we played well. You know, like I don't know if Carson Beck's going to throw 3 interceptions, but I think that Texas feels like they can go out there and have the same kind of success. And I've been wondering about Texas's offense because we've thought that it could be Quinn and his health, right? Is it also that maybe defenses are daring them to run? You're so concerned about the speed. Like, you're so, because they do have, like, they don't have Gunnar Helm is the leading pass catcher based on my observation because he is like such a good matchup advantage underneath when they need to move the sticks. That you take these deep shots to Golden. You know, you take these deep shots that Bond has been a little banged up. Maybe that's been a part of it too. Like, you know, you take these deep shots to Isaiah Bond. You try to hit on the explosive play, but you don't have a lot of possession receiving from a lot of those guys when you've got a lot of raw speed.
I think part of the situation is Sark's play calling is that because their run game has struggled so much all season long, like when we talked about Quinn's average depth of target on his throws, they run a lot of screens. And Sark designs a lot of really interesting and good screens. So I think that kind of has become their run game in a way that has impacted who Quinn's throwing to more often than not. But I also think part of it is, like, we could talk about the receivers that they had, and talent-wise, we've been very high on them. But they're not always getting open. And when they are, a lot of the downfield stuff, I just don't think Quinn can throw it. I don't think they have enough confidence in him to make those throws right now. So I think it's a kind of a limitation of the receivers and Quinn's full health more than anything. And I think Sark has been kind of game planning around it for about 2 months
now. So will Georgia's receivers catch balls?
No.
Yeah.
Unless they're Oscar Delp, who's the best player in the country.
Oscar Delp, Cash Jones. Let's go. Send them all out there.
Carson Beck has been really impressed with the way he's bounced back from the adversity. Since the game against Ole Miss, he's got 11 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, completion percentage is up there. Like, he's shown me a resiliency that a lot of guys, I think, would have crumbled under. And I think a lot of that's credit to 2 things. One, they don't really have a threat behind him, so I don't think he ever was really afraid to get benched. But also, Kirby always backed him, always said he's our guy. And I think there's a lot of value in that for Carson Beck.
He loves him. He's so sweet to him.
Carson Beck legacy game incoming.
Could be.
That's why I believed in him the whole time. This is it, so that he could be ready for this one drive, this one moment. I don't know that it'll be totally home field Georgia. I don't know. Not ready to go there yet, but I get it. I mean, it's Georgia in Atlanta, but there also gets to be some wear and tear when you're there all the time, where Texas can travel and might travel based on the novelty, if that makes sense. Like, if
but don't they limit how many tickets each team gets? If
the lower bowl is going to be split 50-50 no matter what, but then normally Georgia would eat up all of the, extra tickets up at the top, I think you've got a little bit more from Texas than you might get from an LSU or something like that.